Been sleeping for too long. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up!
Wake up! I see the sunshine gazing through the window pane, blazing like endo flame. It's time to wake up. Come to your senses, man. Snow is all around you, but you don't play in the winter games. Cartridges surround you, but you ain't playing Nintendo games. Load them up.
Greetings and welcome back to the Woke Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Jones. And on today's episode, we go and chat with who I call my OG, Sam Simmons. We finish our discussion that we had a few months ago. You can check out Sam earlier 2 episodes. And this will be another 2-part series of Sam. Me and him, we just sat down, chopped it up, talked about a lot of stuff that pertains to black folks, our mental health, things that we need to do and things that we need to be honest about. We need to be honest about these things. We talk about historical and intergenerational trauma, things that are current events that are happening, things that happened back in the 80s, things that happened in the 90s. I mean, we just had a very deep, thought-provoking, conversation-generating conversation. There you go. What kind of title? Look at it. A conversation-generating conversation. So be sure to share with someone you care about. Be sure to hit me up if you have questions. If you agree with something that is said in the podcast, hit me up. If you don't agree with something that's said in the podcast, hit me up. That's what we're here for. We're here to lessen confusion, increase constructive productivity, and stay woke. So tune in. Here we are. Let's go.
Okay, so let's see, where did we leave off? We were talking about the Great Migration in the ghetto area, 1915 and 1968, and so that's what we left off. But this second part, we're gonna start with 1968 to 1975, which I call the ghetto welfare era. This is during that period when African Americans were allowed to get welfare. There's many people who say that welfare really damaged the black family, and you know, and I can understand why people might believe that. But there's some other pieces to go along with that whole piece as well. Right around this time, close to this time, you had the Moynihan Report. The Moynihan Report basically said that black women can't count on black men,
right?
And you got to support black women any means necessary. And we had Johnson with his poverty campaign and all these other pieces to go along with that. And so the question I have when we're talking about welfare, I ask many times is, what's worse, having somebody develop a policy specifically to attack you or destroy you,
right? Or
if they develop a policy without any regard of you? And then that policy has a negative effect on your community.
Right.
And then, it's like, oh, well, we didn't know. Sure. Well, you didn't ask nobody either, right? And your thought about the people,
right?
Less than human still.
Right.
Don't regard that. We don't know. We don't, these, there was some belief or something. Well, they can't, they started right after slavery. Mm-hmm. These people can't take care of themselves. They got to be looked after. Mm-hmm. So let's think about the welfare law. The welfare law, I believe, was it was based on what they call the widow law. They had money set aside for widows, and primarily white widows, mm-hmm. right? So men were never included in this conversation,
right?
Unless they were dead men, okay? And one of the things I remember being a kid back then is they used to have social workers who's almost, it felt like their whole job was to kick people off of welfare. Mm. And they would come to the neighborhood like they was doing a sneak attack on the community, right? And you would have kids be looking out for the social workers, right? Mm. It's like later on the kids look out for Popo during the crack era.
Right.
Mama, the social workers out here. And then you would have fathers of these children running out the door with their shoes or whatever belongings, right? And, back then, if that social worker felt that you had too much food in your cupboard, more than they thought you should, they would get you cut off.
Wow.
If you had like a toaster, because all you supposed to have is a stove and a refrigerator, you could get cut off depending on what mood they was in.
Wow.
If they found one pair of men's shoes in the house, they could cut you off.
Wow.
Okay? That's how intentional they were.
So it's like a form of policing then.
Right.
Like they were policing families.
Right. And they're policing families, but again, it's like, you have these policies, one that don't have no regard for black people.
Right.
And maybe the person who came up with the policy up high had decent intentions, but the issue is that the people on the ground, they doing what they doing, and you don't hold them accountable. We see that to this day.
Yeah.
Okay. And so my question usually to a large general audience is, if they would have had social workers who did this same policy in trailer parks, since 60% of welfare go to white folks, do you think you'd have found some daddies running out the door?
Absolutely.
Silence.
Yeah.
And so at this time also is those jobs that black men came up to the north for, those low education manufacturing jobs, were starting to shut down.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember there's a factory called International Harvester. Used to make them red tractors and combines. My father worked there. I worked there for a little while, right? One of the largest factories under one roof that wasn't making cars.
Wow.
One roof. I mean, so they would start at one end with some tires, and at the other end they would have a combine. Them suckers wasn't little.
Yeah.
Okay, on one line.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So now these jobs go. So what do you do with black men who some of them could barely read, still had skills though, was making $35, $40 an hour. My father, luckily, he retired early 1975, with a great pension, right? But, by the end of 1975, the factory was closed.
Right.
And so what do you do with these men? It's almost like we're at the same spot we ended up at after slavery. What do you do with all these black bodies, especially male bodies, when you haven't thought much of a male body since slavery, right? That your body was worth $1,500. It ain't worth much unless I can lock you up now. Okay? So this perfect storm happened. Some people say it's deliberate.
Sure.
And some people say, just the way it is, right?
Right.
So you had the factories closed, and then you have crack cocaine come in. Okay. The middle class had already left.
Yeah.
Around 1968.
Right.
Because they could.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Freeways started to be built.
Right.
Communities.
Oh, that freeway stuff. That's urban renewal.
Yeah.
and people say, well, they really wasn't trying to destroy the black community. Well, if a freeway go through one black community, that might be, my bad.
Yeah.
But when you got freeways to go through communities all over the country, that's a deliberate deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally.
Right? Literally.
Yeah.
Urban renewal. Yeah, urban renewal is like, we're going to just run these. And these were communities that were functioning on their own.
Sure.
Think about this.
Sure.
We talked about this in the other half. You say you want us to be responsible and be part of the American dream, and we do it without you, you get mad.
Right. Yeah. But
you get mad.
Yeah, that wasn't our purpose here.
I know.
We were supposed to be, a cog in that American dream machine. We were supposed to be the American dream.
Right.
Supposed to just be another wheel to turn.
So the other piece is, now, so when we talk about the ghetto welfare era, which we were referring to as 1968 to 1975, at least that's how I break it down. As I mentioned before, this was several things started happening. You got the factories closing, and then you got crack cocaine being dropped in the community. And I remember during that period how government entities denied that they had anything to do with it.
Right.
And then later on, you got this movie called Kill the Messenger or something like that.
Yeah, it was based off the book Dark Alliance by Gary Webb.
Yeah.
The Messenger. I think it was called The
Messenger. Yeah. Well, the reporter who actually tracked down the fact that they were allowing these drugs to come in and being primarily distributed in the black and brown communities.
Right.
And so and then, you know, one of the other things that's interesting during this period that, because you know how people talk about families, black families don't be together. Unfortunately, from 1960, 22% of African American children lived in single parent homes. And now, so there was actually more black folks married than there was white folks.
Right.
Okay. Now we're down to what currently the report has been tripled. That is 72% of children who live in single family homes. Now, you know, that's a whole nother conversation about what that is, you know, because, you know, some people, well, they done lost their touch with God. Well, there's a lot of single folks in the church, but let me move on, to the next era. And, what we got? So if we got, no jobs.
Right.
So again, we're repeating the same thing that happened right after slavery because all the prisons were filled with black bodies.
Right.
Okay. Throwaway bodies. So around 1975, probably more like 1980, but between 1975 and 1990, we end up with what we call the hyper ghetto. So the only folks left in the hood are a concentration of poverty and the poor and underprivileged. We got this mass incarceration where you're locking up all the older guys, what we call the OGs.
Right.
And the other piece is that we don't talk enough about is crack cocaine affected black women and children. So why is that significant? That's significant because black women historically has always been the keeper of the children.
Right.
Not that black men weren't important, you know, because you know how we get all sensitive and all this other kind of noise around that. It was a way of the way it was, right? Because you had black men who was on the road doing jobs, many different reasons for men to be in and out of the community, right? And so who was looking after the children? Because think about it, in the black community, you had older women who were like our social workers, right? Right. Who would have these big houses, and it'd be a couple of them in the house, right? Yep. And they would go get kids, right? That wasn't being fed and stuff. Bring them back to the house, feed them, clothe them, and then the mama, who in the case I knew of, or cases where the mama was too busy chasing after some crooked old man, you know, who had a pretty car, you know, made her feel important. And she gonna come fuss with the old ladies about her children, and they're saying, no, the babies can stay here until you figure out your life. You ain't taking my babies, and you know, and talk all crazy to the old ladies, right? And then might even have, you know, nickel dime pimp come in talking about, you gonna give my woman, he don't care nothing about them babies because they ain't his. You gonna give my woman her babies. And then one of them old women, usually in her bra, had a 38, and you know, and will pull that bad boy out, you know, and you know, issues, you know, because that was like, you know, in our community it was Miss Ethel. Miss Ethel was like, man, dudes are scared of her. It's like she didn't play, you know, and you know, and then in some cases, those two black women that lived in the big house been living in the big house for years, right? You know, would be rumors, but nobody would talk about that, you know, because you know we got, you know, we don't talk about that, you know, we assume some stuff, but. So you got the hyper ghetto is like, it ain't safe for the children. And then you got the 13, 14-year-olds, and anybody who's about 39 or 40 know exactly what I'm talking about because they would have been that 12, 13, 14-year-old who had to fend for themselves, fend for their brothers and sisters. I'm a 13-year-old. I'm scared to death, and I'm out on the street trying to make it. Right. And then all the OGs are locked up. You know, you like it or not, they kept a little bit of order. You know, I don't necessarily, you know, go with that's the only order we should have had, but they had some order.
Yeah, it was some structure.
Right. But them young cats, man, the best way to not be afraid is what? have a gun.
Right.
So now everybody got a gun because everybody's scared.
Yeah.
And now they got to a point where they've been scared so long, they stop being scared. And when you stop being scared, you become dangerous.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay? Because you ain't good for yourself or nobody else at that point.
Right.
And then you have difficulties loving folks appropriately, including family. You have difficulties in all the other emotional areas.
Right.
And so, you got that going on. So you got the hyper gang violence, right?
Sure.
And what did they call black folks during that time?
Super predators.
Super predators, yeah. Oh, yeah. We were supposed to forget that.
Sure.
But the interesting thing about the super predator, there was black folks who was promoting that stuff too.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's keep it real.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that we've always, I won't say we always, but during that time, we've had that mentality. We've been indoctrinated in our own, in those, white supremacist or racist views. Those have been internalized. So, and there's people like that think the same way today. Right.
And then you got concentration of police, and a portion of those police were drug dealers too.
Wow. Yeah.
Because what it said, look, you tell them that anything they confiscate, they get to keep. Police departments was cleaning up, doing stings and escalades and all the other kind of stuff, and boats and all this other kind of new boats and stuff, and all the money that was there when they would do the bus.
Wow.
So it was ugly. Talking about hyper ghetto.
Sure.
Now the prisons are full.
Sure.
And then on top of that, unless you was, got one of them street strikes you out and got a life sentence, you're going to get out of jail sometime.
Right.
And so now the jail and the prison look the same. White T-shirts and baggy jeans.
Yeah.
Same mentality.
And you're saying, so the prison / jail culture has spilled into the community.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So it's all that prison incarceration culture has become so normalized that it spills out and other people start to imitate it.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's like, if you open your eyes, it looks pretty clear to me, but we blinded by a lot of stuff.
But it also gets promoted, right?
Right.
So it gets promoted, it gets championed by people in the community, especially when it comes to black males. It gets promoted through media. Then, corporations get a hold to that culture, and then they start promoting different versions of clothing, putting it in music videos, like just all this stuff. Nowadays, we have commercials that promote that same type of lifestyle, even knowing it comes from somewhere. And then also it gets championed. So not only does it get promoted, it gets championed. So that's what the archetype for a man, a real nigga, an alpha male is supposed to be.
Right.
So then that's what everyone subscribes to be like that, even if they're really not about that life.
Right.
That's what, a significant amount of females want. Dudes want to be like it, females want that. So that becomes the norm.
And folks would deny that, even in the community. That, right?
I do know that.
Right.
Yes. But if we're honest and we look at it, that's what's happened over the last 25, 30 years.
But you bring up something that I want to bring up is like people say, well, man, television and all like that, don't make people act a certain way. And there's some truth to that. And the reason I say that is we got white kids imitating that same behavior, right?
To a certain extent, yes.
Yeah. And so the difference is that's not where they come from, right?
Right.
So they can stop anytime.
Right. Exactly.
See, if you don't have a different kind of foundation,
right,
it's a little bit difficult to stop.
Yeah. And I think what ends up happening is people just say it's the media's fault, not understanding that it's just a promotion of what's already happening in the community.
Exactly. But again, that foundation, not having that foundation, especially that these last 3 generations who were raised in trauma.
Right.
Okay? Because all of this is a trauma response. Right. How do I make myself... Because one of the biggest things that we've done in our community, be important any means necessary.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
The peacock syndrome. Look good, smell good, talk good, drive good. Mm-hmm. And if you got a combination of all of them, you could be no doggone good and get away with that as a man. Especially a black man.
Right, right.
So now we go to 1985 to now, and we call it the institutionalized generation.
Yeah.
And what we mean by the institutionalized generation, these are generations that basically been raised by the system.
Right.
You know, these are the young folks who are now young adults, who a lot of them who were raised by child protection.
Yep.
Foster care was a new cottage industry. If you had a room, you could get a kid.
Yep.
And especially when we talk about crack cocaine affecting black women, when they took children from black women, that was not because of the children. That was because they were punishing the black woman.
Sure. Wow. Mm-hmm.
Now, let me tell you one more time. That a lot of times had nothing to do with the children. It had to do with the focus was to punish black women.
Right. If you don't get off this drug, we're going to take your children.
Right. And so we yeah. And so now you got this generation of young people who are raised by the child protection, foster care, welfare, social workers, juvenile corrections, jail and prison. And it's like, if you follow those dots, right. I got clients, when I talk about institutionalized generation, they'll say, ooh.
Yeah.
Because they'll start connecting the dots.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I done been in all of them, Mr. Simmons.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you talking about I'm supposed to be independent, right. when the systems done made me dependent,
right?
And I done got used to being dependent,
right?
And have made it work for me,
right? Yeah.
And it's the same thing America have always done, right? They did it to the Native Americans. You know, you put them on reservations, make them dependent, and then blame them for being dependent.
Right. Yep.
And it ended up being a cottage industry. Think about how big social work and all this got to be over these last 20 years.
Yeah, and this is where I talk about this is like, there's a book that this white female professor put out, and I can't remember what school she's at. I want to say the University of Maryland. I think the book's called $1 Million Blocks, and she talks about it from how you can literally see a block of people. I think she did a research study. It was on one block in, I think, Philadelphia. And she said the block was so dysfunctional that people were in and out of jail that due to that dysfunction, they were making over $1 million in revenue for certain services.
Right.
And so I took that I didn't read the entire book, but I took some of that information. I was like, think about that generated from city to city, from county to county, and how much money's been generated. We have nonprofits that are benefiting off the destruction. We have philanthropy organizations who cycle that money through. We have people who are social workers who need to go to school to get social working degrees,
right.
And boards to be certified on. We have the juvenile justice people. Like this is literally an industry built on the dysfunction of black folks.
Right.
All across the nation.
Right. And then on top of that, then you don't want to necessarily include black folks in the system to help work with their own people.
Right. Exactly. Or if they do include you, they want to tell you how to do it.
Right.
Even though you may have something that's beneficial to the community, because that's a community that you understand and come from, they dictate to you how it should be done because it's not a quote unquote best practice. Yeah,
well, it's a best practice. It's the kind of practice. Best practice could be called, that's the practice that makes me feel comfortable.
Right. Right.
You know, my comfort is more important than the practice.
Right.
You know, because it's like, I've had folks, because of what I do, PhD students talk about, you know, hang out with me and tell me stuff like, I learned more from you than I did my degree, and I spent all this money on this PhD, and be mad.
I mean that's pretty much happened to me. I ain't got a PhD, but the same thing, the stuff that, you know, for both my master's degrees, I mean, it's not even scratching the surface to a lot of stuff that you've put in perspective or helped me figure out, point me in the right direction. So we got this current generation, and I'm starting to look at some other pieces around middle class trauma. Absolutely.
You know, it's got to be traumatizing as a middle class person, because think about how we have trained middle class.
Yeah.
You got to work harder than everybody else. Right. Trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You got to look good doing it.
Yep.
Trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to let a lot of crap slide.
Right.
Trauma.
Right.
And then what do you do with your emotions when you don't feel like you can let it slide anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, when you are a middle class individual, you got the trauma that your whole folks in your community don't accept you,
right,
because you're doing all the middle class things.
Right. And on the flip side of that, it's kind of two things. Being a middle class black person, I think, kind of puts you in a bubble, because you get that uncomfortableness from, you know, the folks in the hood or whatnot.
Right.
But then also you're almost treated like a guest where you live in the suburbs.
Right.
It's like you're not all suburbs, but sure. Most of them, it's like this is not where you're supposed to be. You're just temporarily here. It's
right.
like when black kids go to white colleges,
right.
POWs, predominantly white colleges, right? It's like you should be happy that you're here,
right?
Like, not that this is my school and I can claim this school to be mine,
right?
It's like we allowed you to be here,
right?
It's the same thing,
right? And then you gotta go through what we call respectability test.
Yep.
Or basically, we should call it white folks' comfort test. You know,
yeah.
So you can be deemed okay, yeah. You know. And I've seen folks living in the suburbs, and you'll get them same liberal folks will be talking about, you know, oh, I include everybody, but they'll come up to you because they feel a little bit comfortable with you, mm-hmm. to tell you about the other black family down the street.
Yeah.
Because that black family told them to get out their yard.
Yeah.
You know.
Can you believe Marcus and Sasha said this to me? And they'll do that baiting too.
Right.
You see that happen in workplace situations as well. Well, they'll bait you towards the other black person to see what you would do to get you two in some kind of conflict with each other, as they just sit back and observe. So yeah, I've seen that happen in the workplace.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, but we'll continue. So when we started this conversation, and especially when we started with slavery, a lot of people don't like to talk about slavery, right? Mm-hmm. And so they, you know, so the statement would be, "Aren't you people over this yet?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, chattel slavery lasted 246 years. Mm. Okay. Jim Crow and segregation, which was both up north and down south,
right,
lasted 100 years. So that's 346 years. Right? Last 51 years is when we supposedly have citizen rights. Mm-hmm. Out of 397 years, only 51 years is when we got, you know, because 1965, the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
51 years. Mm-hmm. But we supposed to be over it.
Right.
So let's talk about what is the result of this. What does this look like now? We're talking about trauma response.
Right.
And James Baldwin is quoted as saying, people are trapped in the history, and history is trapped in them. So let's talk about some trauma responses. Now, the Native American community talk about the effects of historical trauma, and you'll see this in our community as well, is the whole thing about the first generation suffers post-traumatic stress, and then every generation after that, you'll see guilt, anger, victim identity, thoughts of suicide, physical symptoms including diabetes and other diseases associated with high-stress hormones. But let's talk about some other ones that go along with this that are more familiar with to us. Mm. Increased aggression. So what do we mean by that? So I use aggression because, you know, I'm in an environment that that I have to find a way to cope, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how to manage my emotions all that well.
Yeah.
So I use aggression to kind of attempt to control my environment. Mm-hmm. You know, so you get the street gangs, the domestic violence, you know, always defiant, you know, because I'm scared and I don't want you taking advantage of me.
Right.
And we really ignore that when it comes to boys, like they can never be victims. Mm. Yeah. Okay. Because one of the things about boys, what they learn, unless they learn some emotional health or cognitive behavioral kind of pieces,
yes,
is they learned that it's better to be the perpetrator than the victim.
Yep.
So we got increased aggression, increased vigilance and suspicion. So we're talking about always being suspicious of systems, no matter if the systems are there to help you. Not trusting persons outside of your social and family relationship network. Now think about this. Yeah. My social and family network is dysfunctional. Mm-hmm. I only trust them, and I might even know they're dysfunctional, but I don't know how to disconnect.
Sure.
Which kind of leads us to that whole thing I think is one of the biggest trauma responses is the codependency of the community, not being able to disconnect when we need to. And that suspiciousness also contributes to always feeling disrespected, right? Which leads us to the sense of always feeling threatened, right? Because that is what adds to that suspiciousness. So now I always got to have a defensive posture. Or, a lot of times people say, well, black men don't smile. Well, I'm one of them. Okay. I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but, my mouth, my cheeks hurt trying to smile, at least trying to do that fake smile.
Right.
But, I was talking to a group of folks, a group of white individuals, and I was telling them, I refuse to smile to make you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that too. I mean, I get that a lot, and this is back to workplace situations, but they will come to you and try to do things to get you to smile, or they want you to dance, or they want you to do all these things that you don't necessarily do or have nothing to do with your job.
Right.
But they'll try to get to do it to make them feel more comfortable with you, because when they can't predict what's going on with you, they get very uncomfortable.
Right.
Even if you're a non-threatening person, like you haven't done anything, but since they don't know, they get uncomfortable. It's funny because I had actually a lady I work with now, two ladies. One of the ladies went up and she asked her, like, what's up with Brandon? Like, do you know anything about Brandon? And she's like, I don't know. She's like, yeah, I'm still trying to figure him out. Now, I've been working at this place for almost a year and a half. What is she trying to figure out?
Right. Right.
What does she mean? I'm trying to figure him out. Like, so she's uncomfortable with me for some reason.
Yeah, well, she's trying to figure out what kind of black person you are.
I'm working there for a year and a half.
Yeah, but see, part of, we talk about whites not wanting to live around blacks. Mm-hmm. It really, it's about race and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's also about that internal kind of guilt stuff.
Yeah.
Just feeling uncomfortable just because it's like, even though you might not be conscious of it.
Yeah.
This crap really ain't that fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I ain't giving up nothing.
Right.
Right. And my humanity in me got me feeling something uncomfortable, and I can't tell you why I feel uncomfortable around them, but I just do.
Yeah.
And the ironic part about that is them feeling uncomfortable around you can get you fired.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the funny thing is, I just thought about this because we were talking about this before we started recording. The same person who asked the other lady, does she know anything about me because she's trying to figure me out, is the same person who called me after Trump won the presidency and apologized for all her racist family members. Voted for Trump. Like, why are you?
Oh man, don't even get me started with that, man. I don't think I made a lot of people happy.
To me for?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you knew them people. I mean, if you were so worried about my children and that before, you knew them people.
She literally called me. She wasn't we work for the same place, but she wasn't in the same location. She literally called me that morning, Wednesday morning, to apologize to me. I was just like, what the hell are you apologizing to me for?
Right.
I haven't said nothing political since I've been here. Y'all don't know who I voted for, if I voted. She called and apologized. I was cracking up. Man.
Oh, man, that stuff happened to me so much. It was like the next day, staff was all bent out of shape. And then they asked me how I felt. And I looked at them. I said, now you know how we feel when we wake up.
Every day.
Yeah. And you want to talk to me about this, Noah?
Yeah.
It's like, didn't you before they voted for Trump? Did you feel anything for my children before then?
Right.
And it's like my racist family. Your family was racist. If they were racist now, they were racist before they voted.
Yeah, man.
It's like I ain't,
Like,
I ain't trying to make you feel good. It's like
man.
it's like when the situation with Castillo happened, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's like a lot of my young colleagues talking about, man, Mr. Simmons, I ain't trying to deal with these white folks, crying and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I ain't trying to hear that.
Yeah.
But let's continue. So as I mentioned, increased sensitivity to threat, so that defensive posture, avoiding new situation, heightened sensitivity of being disrespected. It's like with my guys, you can anything. Just looking at them too long could be disrespectful.
Right. Yeah.
Not letting them get their way could be disrespectful.
Right.
And then what messes them up, I say, I could tell how much, and they all, when you ask them they respect themselves, guess what they say?
Yeah.
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 I said, well, I can tell how much you respect yourself by the way you handle disrespect. Oh, man, you talking about some cats just be like shook.
Yeah.
I don't know what you talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I said what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell how much you respect yourself by the way you handle disrespect.
Right.
So let me see. What are some other? So we got the increase in psychological and physiological symptoms from chronic stress. So because when we're talking about historical trauma and we're talking about Native American, African community, I don't even know in terms of post-traumatic stress. This is not post-traumatic. It's continuous.
Right. Right.
And so when you're under a lot of toxic stress, then it decreases your immune system. So when we start talking about the disparities and health disparities, we cannot ignore the stress around racism and feeling mistreated.
Right.
Increased drug use. We got one of the things, I'm a licensed chemical dependency counselor. I don't practice much, and one of the reasons I don't practice much is a lot of programs that are culture specific don't do a lot around trauma as much as I think.
Yeah.
Because the thing is historically, black folks have used alcohol, drugs, and sex as stress management tools.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And if and so the thing is I remember one of my colleagues a long time ago, he said, look, he says, if we get a cat to go sober and he's still homeless, ain't got no job, got a bad relationship, okay, got these other 4 things wrong, and you ain't helping him with none of them, being sober doesn't feel good.
Right.
So, so again, start out using the alcohol and drugs as a medication, medicate my pain, right? And then after a while, you got this addiction going on and that kind of thing. So behavior modification I think, is very important to address that.
Right.
And trauma work, cultural trauma work. Narrow sense of time. If I live in a chronic state of danger, I do not develop a sense of future and frequently view dying as an expected outcome.
Yeah.
So we got young people in the street. We talking about why would they treat the community like that? Well, shoot, they're more concerned about how they died than how they live.
Yeah.
It's like the story. Oh, Pookie got shot 8 times, man. Pookie was a bad dude. And it's a fatalism from the standpoint that at least you won't never forget Pookie.
Right. Yeah.
The story of Pookie.
Yeah. So the fantasy or the story of Pookie is just as good as Pookie's life in general.
Right. And it's just bizarre how that works.
I mean, we see that here locally in the Twin Cities with how we have these cliques that have developed their clique gang identity around the deaths of certain people.
Right.
So in St. Paul, we have what's called Nunu World, which is like there's a bunch of cliques that identify with this young lady by the name of Nunu who was murdered, and they have developed their gang identity off of Nunu World. And then in Minneapolis, we have somebody who passed named Mumu. So we got Mumu World over in Minneapolis. So it's interesting just how that concept of death has played a role in various different areas within the Black community and how that's been centered around identity formation.
Right.
Somebody's death. I mean, before people were using it for clicks, people get tattoos, RIP tattoos.
Right.
How we do the T-shirts. Some people have murals in their homes. Like, I think culturally that comes from a history where we used to do things like that, remembering our ancestors and things.
Right.
But due to the trauma and what we live today, it's been manifested into what we have now.
Yeah, because the thing is when we had, the generations who were still working together, you could the older generation could help younger generations get through that to some degree,
Sure.
or manage it better.
Sure.
But eventually, unless we dealt with the trauma, it wasn't going to last forever anyway.
Right. Right.
But the other thing is, and this is one I always like to talk about, and then we'll move on, is survival stress management skills. This probably is the more matter of fact thing when we talk about what we see, especially in the African American community. And I think I see it in others, but especially the African American community, living for the moment.
Yeah.
Making decisions in moments without no regard of the consequences.
Right.
Right? Because, because people, well, man, don't they know the consequences? Yeah, but in the moment, it don't matter.
It's not a factor.
No. It's like, for example, we use sex for stress management, right? So we spend all this money, state money, federal money on sex education. Okay? And, certain, diseases that went down, pregnancies that went down, but they stay steady in our community.
Right.
Okay? And part of that is you can have all the sex education you want, but if I'm using sex for stress management, right?
Yeah.
I'm more worried about the moment, right? So when the booty call, the duty call.
Right.
Right? So if I ain't got no condom, that ain't stopping nothing.
Right.
Matter of fact, if you do have a condom, I might not use it because I'm all about how it feel. I've had cats tell me that, man. Like, man, shoot, man, I'm trying to get all deep in it.
Yeah.
But that ties back to slavery too.
Right.
Because black males were brought here for physicality and sexuality. And when they started breeding, using black males, Mandingo males, to breed new slaves. So our masculinity is tied around sexuality.
Right.
And an example of that came up for me is I used to do a lot of work with fathers, both black and white. And I started seeing, not always, but I started seeing my white fathers would come in, get services, right? And go about their business, okay? But one of the things I realized is that my white fathers had no problem telling you they didn't have no girlfriend. But they had more of a problem telling you they ain't got no job.
Yeah.
And they all knew how to use a hammer. And that included the pedophiles. They could get a job.
Yeah.
Because they always knew somebody who knew somebody, and they could care less as long as I keep you on the roof.
Sure.
And you ain't messing with my daughter.
Right.
The black guys, they would tell you they didn't have a job, but they would very seldom tell you they had no woman.
Ass backwards.
Yes.
Damn.
And on top of that, how they have sex is different. Okay? On average, white men have sex to get off. Black men have sex to perform.
Explain that a little bit.
Okay. What I mean by that is if I'm having sex to get off, I don't have to have vaginal sex.
Oh.
We could use underarms, I don't want to get too graphic. Yeah.
All types of freaky business.
Yeah, but if I'm trying to do some work, I want to get deep down in it, vaginal sex becomes the most important. Right? Because I don't want you to forget me. I want you to remember me.
Right.
So I mean, because you've seen that a while back with young white kids that were having oral and anal sex and at a high number, and folks is freaking out.
Right.
Them kids like, look, we ain't trying to have no babies.
Right. Wow.
So, and then how we use food. Because think about it, food and alcohol. Now we done got a little bit better, but think about family gatherings. How much alcohol and food have to be at a family gathering?
Right.
And we'll plan all year for that one gathering.
Right.
So living for the moment. We have learned how to survive our trauma by living for moments.
Right.
And we'll talk about the moments, right? Be miserable as hell, but we'll talk about the moments.
Right.
1948. Remember, we was at Auntie Mary's house for Thanksgiving. That was the best Thanksgiving. And then when they get really talking about it, Uncle George actually cussed everybody out and acted a fool. But you don't quite tell that part of the story.
Yeah.
The kids remember that part of the story because it scared the hell out of them.
Sure.
And then the other thing about that is we have lost a resiliency that includes hope. Because the resiliency to me includes hope.
Yeah.
For the next generation.
Sure. So you're talking legacy, pretty much.
Right.
Right.
So what does that look like currently? Okay. Dr. El-Kadi, history is not about the past, it's about the present. In the Native American community, what it looks like is that Native American males 20 years or older are twice as likely to die from motor vehicle accidents, nearly 4 times more likely to die from pedestrian injuries, 4 times more likely to commit suicide, 3 times as likely to be murdered, and a person has higher risk for suicide if their parents, close relatives, have taken their own life. That's what we're seeing, and you see, especially the suicide amongst Native American men.
Yeah.
So what does that look like in the community, African American men? And so what we got is that hypermasculinity. And we kind of touched on some of this, right? High physical pain threshold, poor emotional regulation and numbness, highly objectification of females, at the same time, female dependent.
Yeah.
Which is like, look at that contradiction.
Sure.
I don't trust you, but I'm so dependent on you.
Yeah.
And then some of our younger generation do not like women.
Yeah.
And then when I say it to them, what you trying to say, Mr. Simmons? You can't call me gay? No, I'm not trying to call you gay. It's like you don't like women.
Yeah.
You like what they do for you, but you don't like them.
Right. Yeah, I see that a lot too.
And so, and then we can add the fact that they're consistently portrayed in media as sexualized, primitive manner of super masculine. So we're living up to the picture.
Yeah.
And that appeals to white audiences, but at the same time stimulate their fear.
Right.
And then we look at the adolescents between 13 and 25, where both the male and female are both, in some cases, both predator and victim. And then they use sex for significance, security, belonging, and power. Especially them young men.
Yeah.
They don't even know that the way they run their relationships is called trafficking.
Yeah, running trains on girls.
Right.
Yeah.
Or got the 3 girls, you got your down girl, and she'll do whatever you ask.
Sure.
Why don't you go over
pieces.
Yeah, why don't you go and give him some? 'Cause I need them. He got some tires I want.
Yeah.
Okay, daddy.
Yeah.
And then what we find is they've been doing this, don't understand the full concept of that because ain't nobody in our community breaking it down in that way.
Sure.
And they next thing you know, they locked up. And then they're a sexual predator. Now they got another label on them that's gonna make it even twice as hard to get a job. Right. Male neediness by our young females, female dependent, as I mentioned before, glorifying death, what I call Tupac Biggie syndrome.
Yeah.
Bigger in life and death than because think about our young people. I'm an old man. I got young people who have been to more funerals than I have ever been to. And that's not the way it's supposed to work.
Right.
And then they got rooms full of rest in peace t-shirts. They're surrounded by death. And you want to talk about life?
Sure.
And then the rite of passage for both men and women, really. But for our young men, if you talk to them, when did you realize you was a man? It's probably over 50% of them tied to some type of trauma.
Right. Yep.
The call at 16, my little girlfriend is pregnant. In front of the judge at 16, 10 to 12. The death of my partner. I have cats from Chicago. Dude said, man, they shot my girlfriend right next to me. Damn. Yeah. Right, we walking down the street. The bullet hit her. Oh. So as a people, we have found ways to not deal with our trauma.
Right.
And I understand why we don't deal with our trauma, because we are worried about what other people think.
Right.
The problem is they already think it.
Right. As
a matter of fact, and they ain't thinking it correctly.
Right.
And they're already using it against us.
Right.
And we're using it against each other.
Right.
So, but that's the...
Let me add something, because I think there's another element to what you just broke down as far as how we're responding. And this is for younger black females, not really just younger black females in general, is I've noticed a increase, especially over the last 5 to 8 years or so, of females being more aggressive.
Yes.
And if you look at suspensions of children, especially in urban communities, black females are skyrocketing. If you look at the prison populations that have increased the most over the last 20 years, black females are skyrocketing.
Right.
And black females have, once again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about that promotion and that championing of a behavior. Like, there are a lot of if you look at fight videos, if you just type in teen fight videos on YouTube, you're going to see a bunch of black females fighting. And I think that, I don't know what's going on. I have some ideas, but we really need to get a hold of what's going on with black females as far as levels of aggression, frustration, and how they're lashing out on each other. I mean, we have popular TV shows that, whether we're talking Love and Basketball, Bad Girls Club, any of these reality TV shows, they always got black females fighting each other on there. But so that's a level of promotion that this is a behavior that's entertaining, it's funny, it's okay. But then if you really look at it on the ground and you get off the TV, it is happening in the community.
Right.
And I'm seeing, every week I'm getting a new client, black female client, who's having issues with other black. It's gotten so bad that at one of my schools, I am seeing people who got beef with each other. and it can be about anything.
Right.
It can be about a dude that they both like. It can be about somebody looked at her wrong, or someone posted something on Facebook or Snapchatted or sneak dissed or subtweeted. It doesn't even matter. But the girls are just like hostile. And they're fighting dudes now.
Oh, yeah. But see, think about this. But think about the way that we have ignored in the community domestic violence, right?
Yeah.
So we got this last 3 generations. These little girls have seen how their mothers and grandmothers have been dealt with, right? And the last 3 generations have shrunk. Because they're like only maybe 14 years between the generations.
Yeah.
And when you shrink the generations, you shrink wisdom, right? And so these girls have learned to fight back, right?
Yep.
And they also have been taught that being a girl, especially being a black girl, is very insignificant and not respected by anyone.
Right.
Not just they're not respected within the community.
Right.
They're not because they're not respected in the community. They're not respected by the white community, especially white females.
Right.
And so they're so full of anger and fear. They are just emotionally out of control. And then on top of that, if they get out there and they throw down, again, you get attention. And no attention is better than some attention is better than no attention.
Yep. Absolutely.
You could become a star off of craziness like that.
For real, yeah.
And then you got the other option where you got girls who are not necessarily gay who dress like boys to keep themselves protected from boys. Like downplay their appearance so they don't get sexually assaulted.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. Wow.
So you're on point, and we'll talk more about that as we'll get towards the end of this.